I'm Myron Vernus, aka Junkman, sitting in my 1971 Cushman Combo 1. I started reading Jalopnik a long time ago, back in the early days, as a lurker initially. Really never commented on any blogs or anything, but I took the plunge and got myself a commenter nickname and started contributing. What I really found was that Jalopnik, the Jalopnik spirit, attitude, whatever you want to call it, kind of reflected my taste in cars. I don't know if you call it taste, but maybe proclivities to cars. So it was all-encompassing. I always say that I have a bad case of automotive ADD. So, and the guys that wrote for Jalopnik were the same way, I found. It's the Lita Caballero. It's not Caballero, it's Caballero with a 1L. Known worldwide as the most beautiful and finest automobile ever made in Post Falls, Idaho. Pretty rare car, Deutsche Bonnet Le Mans Spider from the early 60s, right before they went out of production. I think only about 20 examples were made. Not that anybody will recognize the XR1, but this is what used to be the XR1. They called it the world's first electronic automobile. The Olsen Eagle actually found on Jalopnik. All the bodywork, all the modifications were made with nothing but chicken wire, cardboard, fiberglass, and Bondo. So Mike Spinelli has suggested that I may have the most Jalopnik garage in existence. I can't confirm that one way or another, but in retrospect, when I think back of the decisions that I make in buying cars, I sometimes think, how would a Jalopnik person think about this? What they think about this car. So in that vein, picked out a few cars today to drive that would appeal to Jalopnik readers, commenters, enthusiasts. The first one being a Ghia 450 SS, which kind of embodies the whole spirit. The beautiful Italian body, but the American muscle. This is actually the first of 52 that were made. And it was owned by Bert Sugarman originally, who actually had the cars commissioned just in the vein of the original dual Ghias and Chrysler Ghia concept cars from the 50s. He opened a dealership, a dedicated dealership actually in Beverly Hills to sell these cars, and sold it to his friends primarily in the entertainment and sporting industry. And when he was done with it, passed it on to a basketball player by the name of Wilt Chamberlain, who most people would know is probably the highest scoring basketball player of all time, but most people don't know was a real car enthusiast, was a Maserati enthusiast. And when he got the car, obviously, because of his size, some modifications had to be made, so he took it to Boyd Coddington, I think, who had, at the time, just recently opened his shop. And did some modifications to the interior and replaced the original Chrysler 273 4-barrel with hot-rodded small block Chevy, putting out about 350 horsepower right now. Even though you have this beautiful car that everyone thinks that you're driving around, this Highline exotic, the reality is Pep Boys AutoZone Summit Racing can supply all the parts you need at bargain prices, and we did a brake job on the car last year before the driving season, and because we took top-of-the-line parts in total for all 4 brakes, and I think we did a fuel pump too, was about $180. Could have got it done for $75, but we splurged on that. The feature in Jalopnik that caught my attention most was the Jalopnik Fantasy Garage, because every car they put up there was a fantasy of mine. And then one day, this little Japanese car shows up in the Fantasy Garage, and it was a Honda 1300 Coupe 9. It was unlike the other ones because all the other cars were like really exotic, really expensive, unobtainium kind of cars, where the 1300 Coupe 9 is very exotic in its own right and difficult to find in this country because they were never imported, but kind of within the realm of reality for an average guy. By fate, not too much longer, a friend of mine in California was involved in bringing a Coupe 9 into the country, probably the first one into the United States. Kind of an interesting three-way deal later, ended up with the car. It was the last car designed and engineered by Dr. Honda before he retired from active involvement in the engineering process. So it was kind of his halo car. Honda was still very involved in Formula One, and you can kind of tell a lot of the Formula One technology are dry sump engines. This specific car has a Super Trap exhaust, so it's got a different sound to it, but the one with the original exhaust, my first 1300 Coupe 9, has the original exhaust, and the sound is really, the best way to describe it is a combination of Formula One and lawnmower. It was really the first, I call it my gateway drug to Jalopnik cars. Another car that I chose to drive was our Isuzu 117. It's a relatively recent acquisition, got it early this spring, and when we got it here, it was just such a cool car and such a proper car that I decided to make it my daily driver. Like the Honda 1300 Coupe 9, just one of those cars that the Japanese put out that was fantastic but was stealth to the rest of the world. Probably the coolest thing is that it's Giugiaro design. We think it's the first Japanese car designed by an Italian designer. He did this as his first major project when he joined the firm of Ghia. And ironically, the Ghia 450 SS that we have and this car were his first two projects at Ghia. He was just finishing up the details on the 450 SS, but this is his first clean sheet of paper project for Ghia, and brought it to production in 1968. And it was kind of the halo model for Isuzu. Hand-built cars initially, but they kept them in production until 1981. And you know, the cool thing about cars like these are grassroots collectors can still find great bargains. The total investment of the car is under $10,000. And not only do you have a unique car that's interesting and people enjoy and it's beautiful, it's a Japanese car. You turn the ignition, it starts, go down the road. It's got air conditioning, power steering, power brakes, and the best AM/FM cassette radio available in 1981. People ask me all the time, what's your favorite car? Well, there isn't. You know, my favorite car, the pat answer is either the one I'm driving at that point or the next one. But the Paxton is and always will be one of my favorites.
Anger is my friend without condition. Peace is for the ordinary man. If you never love the way you're living, you'll never learn to love someone again.
I have a real obsession with Brooks Stevens' designs and his history. I think truly underrated for the contribution he made to industrial design and automotive design. The Paxton is the one Brooks Stevens prototype that I do have. It has a fair level of importance in automotive history too. It was a concept that was commissioned by Robert Paxton McCulloch superchargers, Paxton superchargers, McCulloch chainsaws. He decided in the early 50s that America needed a great grand touring car. So we hired Brooks Stevens to do a body design, a famous engineer out of Detroit named Roscoe Hoffman to do chassis design, and he hired Abner Doble, who was really the greatest steam car designer and builder of all time, to develop a unique steam engine for the car. He put together a dream team to make this car happen. As you can see, Stevens did his job on the body, all kinds of weird, wacky, interesting touches, including electrically retractable hardtop, telescopic wheel, and all kinds of things like that. Hoffman delivered just an amazing chassis for the time, but Doble never really got the steam engine going. So after spending about $1.5 million in the early 50s.
McCulloch decided to pull the plug on the project and get his people back to designing chainsaws and superchargers where they were making money. And I had a leftover Porsche 356 engine and transmission from a car that they bought to tear apart to study, and had his engineers install it in the car, and it's been powered by this 52 Porsche 1500 Super engine since day one. Still on its original tires, and a true survivor car. Original paint, original upholstery, nothing's been changed.
As we speak, it's turning 755 original miles.
As a result of acquiring the Paxton from the Brooks Stevens estate 14 years ago, I was able just recently to acquire the car that I've been dreaming about since I first saw it 14 years ago in the Brooks Stevens collection. It's the 1935 Hoffman X8. It was gifted to Brooks Stevens in 1961 by Roscoe Hoffman. The great thing about having a one-off car is, first of all, you got bragging rights, but the bad news is you have nothing to go by. So when an issue comes up, you're totally on your own. You don't know where you're going to go, and you have to be very careful to do no harm, to use a medical term, I guess. I'm blessed to have a really, really good friend in master mechanic Lynn Smith.
I find a great motivator has been that you won't want to be the one remembered as the guy that screwed up one of these one-of-a-kind cars. There were assumptions about this one-of-a-kind engine along with a one-of-a-kind car that was just absolutely fascinating at the same time as just worrying your socks off. Apparently, as the story seems to go, Henry Ford wasn't convinced that V8s were the wave of the future. He thought they were these X-shaped engines. With that in mind, this thing appeared. It has some real unique features. It's a unibody, it has an independent rear suspension. It just has a great shape and that's consistent with the art and ideas of the 30s. And yet we find things that make it look like there was consideration for production as opposed to a one-off test bed.
About 2 weeks before the car was supposed to go on the trailer to head for its debut at Pebble Beach, we discovered that there was water in the crankcase, and the people that were working on it had no way of remedying that. So we put it on the trailer, brought it to Ohio, and we spent 2 weeks trying to first discover what the problem was and remedy the situation.
So after some trials and tribulations, finding out where the water leak we believe came from, we custom-made gaskets, pulled a cylinder head, found that it had the most unusual combustion chamber God ever dreamed up. If there was committees at work, they were working on the cylinder head. And within that, we found it was no longer a flathead, but an overhead valve engine.
Really, every logical assumption we made turned out to be totally wrong.
But Lordy, we got to the point, filled it up with oil, thought we have to test it. It lit off amazingly easy and was smooth, kind of unbelievably smooth. I still am not quite sure why, but I don't want to think about it for a while.
Even today, we still can't figure out why some of these things work the way they do, but obviously the people in 1935 were a lot smarter than us today.
I think that probably of all of Myron's interesting pieces certainly was a big one. But some of this junk, I just don't care if it runs.
One of the cars that I have that isn't universally appreciated is one of my favorites, and it's a 1991 Buick Century. And you say, gosh, what's Jalopnik about a 91 Buick Century? Well, it's a car that we found in San Francisco. It's an art car that was painted, decorated by a famous underground comic, tattoo artist, graffiti master by the name of Mark Baudet.
That man will have haunted me all my life.
He and his father, Vaughn Baudet, were famous for comics that they had done back in the 70s and 80s for the National Lampoon and publications like that. And he worked his magic on our 91 Buick. All done in rattle can and airbrush, and he swore that he would never do one again because he got sunburned in the 2 days in San Francisco that he did the car. It's got all kinds of neat touches. We love driving it. My daughter drove it to high school a few times when she was still in school. It's just the proper car. You put on your driving fezzes and down the road you go. I'm always on the hunt for new cars. I spent most of my evenings checking out Jalopnik and other sites for cool cars that might come up. I'm on the trail of probably about a half dozen cars right now, you know, low production, one-off. Some in great shape, some in horrible shape, but it's never really mattered to me. On my wish list, someday soon I wouldn't mind having an Alfa Montreal, which I think is a great looking car, represents its era just perfectly. A Ford GT, you know, Camillo Pardo's, you know, genius design. And a Porsche 959, I guess, is kind of, to me, the ultimate Porsche. So yeah, those are kind of mainstream things in addition to the one-offs that I could tell you about, but I'd have to shoot every one of you.
I love that you just mentioned that you were going to shoot everyone.
Yeah.
There aren't many cars I don't like, but I kind of have pockets of cars I really obsess over, and Matras are one. We've had quite a few Matra de Jets. My first Matra was actually a Bagheera S, which I still have, and I had been looking for a Murina. Now, none of these cars were ever imported, but that kind of makes life more interesting, and it's never stopped me before. So I saw this one became available. I've been looking for a Murina, and when I saw the picture of the folk art on the hood, I knew I had to have it. It was down in Florida. It had just been imported, and we made it ours. So three across seating, which was kind of a trademark for the Bagheera and the Murina. A lot of people ask why, and you know, the easy explanation is that it's a French car. You got to have room for both your mistress and your wife. 2.2 liter, very well balanced, 50-50 weight dispersion. Aluminum body, very lightweight with a space frame. So very successful race cars. Matra had very successful race cars. They never raced these models. These were strictly built for the street as kind of image cars.
Is that a French Panther?
No, it's German. It was done in Germany.
So yeah, what's the story?
I don't know.
Behind the,
I have no idea. I don't know. You know, that's something you wouldn't expect a German to do to any car, especially a French car. But that kind of added to the appeal. And he even signed it. He has a very cool little logo down there. Kind of looks like a Hershey's Kiss.